Hello, everybody. My name is Ezra Stone. I am a therapist and a writer and a real live adult trans person. So I wrote this talk back in January when the world was very different. Right after Brandon canceled the conference that I was going to present at, a lot of things happened. Our local schools closed. I drove up to Washington, D.C. to pick up our eldest child from college. My work as a therapist changed really dramatically. I suppose we're calling that pivoting. We already have kind of a pandemic lexicon that we've overused, it feels like. And then I was reassigned to a different job, working in an inpatient facility with a lot of stress and a lot of crisis. So there was a real series of adjustments for me and my family this spring, or was it a series of crises? Whether something is a crisis or just an adjustment, I think depends on how many resources and what kind of resources that you have at your disposal, as well as your internal state and how you have processed crisis and stress and overwhelm in the past. And then shortly before George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis and anti-racist activists rightly raised hell around the world, Brandon asked me to give this talk virtually. As I watched and allied myself with the visionary intersectional Black organizers in Gainesville and around the world, I really thought a lot about whether it was the right time for me, a white person, to talk about anything other than racism. And in fact, this talk is about what we often refer to as self-care. But at the same time, I feel that the pandemic has taught us, and that the current calls to dismantle racism are teaching us the vital importance of care, not fellow white people, so that we can just sit at home and feel satisfied with ourselves, but so that we can be present in the struggle and sustain ourselves and show up for our communities, and understand and use our privileges appropriately. I think it's really, really important that white people don't get overwhelmed and just check out, or that white people get overwhelmed and lean on their Black and brown friends and colleagues and community members. So I proceeded with this talk, edited somewhat to reflect the current moment and to focus specifically on some somatic and self-care meditation therapeutic techniques that have been helpful for me and helpful for clients that I've worked with, in the hopes that these resources will help all of you out there in internet land, to ground and reflect and move forward with helping build the world that we want to live in. And then finally, I want to amend the title of the presentation, although I'm not exactly sure yet what I want it to be called. I feel like talking about my surviving a terrible year as a white person, as a relatively safe person in the world, sounds kind of insincere in the context of all of the literal intergenerational survival that Black Americans and people of color have had to navigate since the founding of this country. So right now, instead of survival, I'm thinking more about how I learned to metabolize some of the stresses and chaos and trauma of the last year for me, so that I can be present and be involved and share these skills and resources with others. So now I'm going to go to my first little slide. So while I was initially preparing to give this talk back in January and February, I was also helping my 10-year-old son. Oh, this is what I need to do, so you can see it better. Okay, so while I was getting ready to give this talk initially, I was also helping my 10-year-old son with his first science fair project. He loves vehicles, so he was studying what type of surface makes a toy car go the farthest. Each week, he had to turn in a different step of the project, beginning with an essential question, a hypothesis, the list of materials, the procedure, the data, and then finally a conclusion. And that's a good exercise, right? We take one problem and we break it down into its component parts. So the essential question for this little talk that I'm giving now is, how do we deal with a bad year? How do we metabolize and process the stress and the chaos so that we can feel calm and centered and do the things that we need to do in the world and feel and be okay? But really, I'm sorry, I have sort of tricked you. I don't entirely know how to survive, metabolize, deal with a bad year, a bad generation, a toxic anything. But I do have some tentative conclusions. Um, I'm going to go back to the video now. Okay. All right. So the last time that that I spoke publicly about anything, I'm a therapist. I talk to people individually and in small groups all the time. But the last time I spoke really publicly was the day before I had top surgery, which was in October of 2018, a Pride Sunday at our church, the United Church of Gainesville. I felt really good, but I also felt really nervous. I was nervous to talk publicly about my transition, which I had mostly been describing in sort of vague terms, saying I did not feel like a woman. I want to be more comfortable in my body. I feel kind of in between. And I try to be funny when things are hard, or at least when things feel personal. So as a therapist, I can sit with your pain and your problems all day, help you unpack your backpack of troubles, acknowledge the difficulty of healing and how brave it is for you to try. But when it comes to my own shame and my own feelings and my own body, the first word that comes to mind is just like gross. And often we talk about taking care of ourselves, self care as an individual responsibility. When I was in grad school, our professors often told us that we need to practice good self care so that we don't get destroyed by our future jobs. One professor told us the best way to avoid burnout is to live a really good life outside of work. And that's fine advice, but it isn't always possible. Um, and I don't entirely have answers of what to do with our bad years or our bad times. Um, but I metabolized my bad year by changing my name and watching my body change. And so throughout my bad year, I had transition. I had something happening below the surface for me. I'm not recommending that you necessarily start or intensify hormone replacement therapy as a solution for your bad year. Um, Whether or not reorienting your endocrine system will be beneficial is obviously not up to me. But I do think the answer has something to do with bodies. Okay, so all right, I have another slide, but I'm not going to go to it because it's actually not very good. But in the DSM, which is, I probably have mine around here somewhere. The DSM is the diagnostic handbook for mental illnesses. In the DSM criteria for PTSD, one of the criteria is negative alterations in mood or cognition as a result of a traumatic experience. One of the examples that they give as a negative thought that someone might have because of PTSD is that, quote, my nervous system is permanently ruined. I didn't know that it was there until recently when I was looking closely at the criteria. But I think that's really fascinating because that's the kind of hard thoughts that I have. But I didn't know that normal people have those kinds of thoughts. Throughout most of my bad year, which was roughly speaking the fall of 2018 until the beginning of this year, my whole nervous system felt broken. I felt tense and jangly and depleted, like some vital mineral had been sucked out of my bones. So we're going to do a little exercise now, and I invite you out there in internet land to follow along. I'm gonna toggle over to one of my slides. All right, so you can enjoy for a few minutes these cute little guys that some kids made a few years back in a violence prevention group I was doing. So we're just going to do a little body scan exercise. So take a moment and scan through your body, feeling your feet touching the ground or touching the floor, noticing your ankles, noticing and paying attention to your calves and your shins. Scan your attention up through your knees and your thighs and up into your hips and your pelvis. You can feel the floor against your feet and the chair against your back if you're sitting. Notice how the muscles in your belly feel. See if you can tune into the muscles between your ribs, and then feeling into your chest and your sternum. Bringing your attention to your shoulders, down your arms all the way to your fingertips, noticing any sensations or feelings there. And bringing your attention up to your neck and your jaw, noticing any tension or tightness in your neck and your jaw. Feeling all through your face, your mouth, your nose, your eyes, your temples, your ears, and all the way up to the top of your head. What parts of your body are easy to notice? What parts are you unable to feel into? Pay attention to any feelings of tension that you notice, any feelings of tingling, any temperatures that you notice, whether something in your body feels warm or cool, and notice if anything feels braced or like you're stuck. Is it easy or is it effortful to sit here quietly? Maybe you would prefer to stand up or lie down. Maybe you feel like you want to run away. Um, in this exercise, I was initially imagining, of course, that we would be doing this exercise at the conference, sitting in a crowded lecture hall full of people. And the next part speaks to that. Maybe the person next to you is in fact too close for comfort, but you are too polite to move away from them. Or maybe it isn't quite a conscious thought. I, for one, feel vaguely uneasy if I sit too close to someone and my skin feels sort of prickly. So you might be listening to this at home with your family, your roommates, by yourself. You might be listening to this while you are out taking a walk or riding your bike. But notice how and think about how it feels to be physically close to others, and knowing that's something that's become very different for us all in the last few months. Um, so pay attention to what comes up when you try to notice how your body feels and sort of name and scan through all of its parts. Notice if it's hard. It's hard for a lot of us to notice what's going on in our bodies. Are there any images that come up for you? Any words or phrases? Sometimes I imagine gold flakes inside me settling like the contents of a snow globe, um, or things shifting slightly like the plates under the earth. So excuse me, I hiccuped. Sit with those sensations and images for a few moments. And then when you tune into what you're feeling in your body, notice if something intensifies or if something dissipates. So, what does it mean to tell a story about trauma? Sometimes my clients come into therapy for the first time, and even when I assure them that the purpose of therapy is not to make them say everything bad that ever happened, sometimes people do just come in and pour all of it out, all the bad things that have ever happened to them, like in one tangled, jumbled, disorganized mess. Sometimes people say that this makes them feel better. Um, but often people seem overwhelmed or they seem kind of checked out or dissociated. Sometimes after those initial big shares, people don't come back to therapy at all. But the work of telling stories and the work of doing good therapy um, is a testament to how important it is to tell our stories right, that they can't be pressured and that they can't be forced. Near the end of my bad year, I started telling people my new name. But I kept telling them it's a soft opening, like when you start a bakery and just have a few friends come by before the bakery is truly opened. My whole transition has been like this, full of jokes and metaphors, things said lightly in a cheery voice, or with averted eyes and a lightly mocking tone. Sometimes, especially at first, I would say and then the name followed by a verbal question mark. I want to be Ezra, or I want people to know that I'm Ezra. But again, like always with transition, the grammar is kind of confusing. And if I want to be Ezra, or I want to make people know that I'm Ezra, I have to do things about it. No fairy godmother or Jesus or mom is going to show up and say, hey, I noticed you have a scanty little mustache and a little more upper body strength. Would you like for me to do the magic thing now and everyone will know you differently and you'll never have to say anything? No, that's not how it works. When my father had a heart attack last year, I was only 5 weeks out of top surgery myself. My own heart was so visible through my thin skin, and I was supposed to be wearing a Velcro compression vest, which made me feel hot and claustrophobic. I was still aching, still being careful with my arms. My dad had a heart attack around 11 p.m. in South Florida, where he had just moved. I got a call from my mother around midnight. I sat up most of that night, texting my sister, and then the next morning I drove to Miami to see him. Um, my dad had a stent in his leg for a balloon pump, so he couldn't move even though he badly wanted to. I wiped his sweaty face with a cold towel and patted around the room in my striped socks. That night, I fell asleep in a hospital recliner to the sound of the pump like a toy train. I spent so much time in hospital rooms that I wanted to run from. When my father was so sick, we thought he would die over and over. And also when he was acting silly and gregarious, when my mother reminisced about the good times, and there were good times, and when she and my sister talked for hours on the endless drive from Miami back to North Florida about what they thought he should eat when he got out of the hospital, as if that would save him. To stay when your body is screaming to run takes enormous effort. And to remain upright when your body wants to collapse takes enormous effort. So, over the past couple of years, I have been trained in somatic experiencing, which is a form of trauma therapy that relies a lot on body sensation and body awareness to process trauma. And one of the concepts in somatic experiencing that's really valuable is the idea of titration. So we process emotions, we process story, we process feelings a little bit at a time without getting overwhelmed. Um, and I believe in titration. So um, here are some pictures of things that, when I feel overwhelmed, help me to feel more grounded, more stable, and safer, and comfortable in my body. These are my dogs and my guinea pig. The guinea pig, you might hear him scrabbling around. His little cage is on the floor over here. So something that feels good is talking baby talk to my dogs and petting their soft, hairy faces, how they curl up into round boulders of fur and breath, especially the black dog on the end with the white muzzle. She likes, her name is Hannah, she likes to put her face near mine. She likes to smell me and rest her parts on me. When I'm near my dogs, near my animals, I feel like an animal myself, even though I also feel responsible for them. Um, so this is a time for you to reflect for a few moments on the things that help you prevent feeling overwhelmed, things that help you feel grounded, things that are soft and warm in your home or in your life. Now I'm going to figure out how to backtrack. All right, so I have another exercise for you. This one is an exercise in imaginary boundaries. So again, take a moment and notice how your body feels right now. Notice your posture. Notice if anything is moving right now in your body, your hands or your feet. Um, Notice any tension or any twitching in your face or your jaw. Um, and if you feel comfortable doing so, just close your eyes for a moment and think for a moment about someone that you love to be around. This could be a person or an animal, someone that you want to have in proximity to you. And just notice if anything inside your body changes when you think about that person. Do you notice anything soften or get warm? Do you notice any impulses to lean or to embrace? Does anything settle inside you? Now, and we'll just do this part for a moment to keep it manageable. Think about a person that you dislike, like a nosy neighbor or um, a fussy coworker or something. Not like a level 10 person that is really unsafe or you can't stand, but just somebody that you don't like to have near you. So think about that person for a moment and notice if anything shifts inside your body, if anything happens in your face, if you feel anything tense up, if you have any impulses to move away or to lean back. Maybe you feel a little activated or a little bit of nervous energy thinking about this person. Or maybe you feel collapsed or resigned. I've done this exercise in groups of people, with groups of students in particular, when I was working in a school setting. And doing this exercise, obviously, I can't do this right now because it's over the video, but it is really remarkable to watch how people's affect changes as they imagine these different people, especially the second part when people, you can see the disgust or the discomfort on people's faces. Often they cringe or they pull backwards as if that person is in front of them. And these sensations, this somatic awareness is really important. Um, so we have another little piece of this, um, which is now again still trying to sort of be calm and still and think about, notice how your body's feeling now. Think about telling your private stories, not don't not your thoughts about it, like, oh God, I could never do that. That's a thought. Or this is the one thing that I will never tell anybody. That's also a thought. But notice how it feels to think about telling those private stories. Do any emotions come up or any physical sensations in your body? Um, Shame, disgust, anxiety, excitement, joy. Um, And are there any stories that are buried so deep that you can't imagine telling anyone or you don't even know how to verbalize them? So now let's just take a couple of deep breaths because those can be kind of intense exercises. Again, just noticing how your body feels, noticing your feet on the floor, and your body in your chair. If you feel a little tense or a little anxious, and you need to do a little movement, you might want to shake your wrists out, um, roll your ankles, wiggle your feet, let a little of that kind of nervous energy out. So again, how we talk about things and this the speed and the pacing of telling our stories is really, really important. So I could white knuckle through telling about something horrible that happened. I could turn it into a joke. I could intellectualize it. But all of those things are forms of dissociation that keep us disconnected from our bodies and disconnected from our stories. And sometimes for some of us, we can talk about things instead of feeling them. Which is why I'm encouraging you while we talk about trauma and pain and crisis to notice the bodily sensations that come up and notice things that can and learn things that can help you settle and regulate. Um, a skill that we teach and that we use in therapy a lot is called distress tolerance. Um, so, distress tolerance is a way of sitting with bad feelings, um, finding their edges and textures, and using skills to acknowledge reality, to accept reality, to calm our bodies down. Um, so, some feelings that I notice when I'm under a lot of stress, I notice a twitching behind my knee and a bracing shoulder, um, or a bracing feeling. I'm going to turn the video back on. Okay. Because I want to kind of show a little bit of the physicality. But often when I'm under a lot of stress and I try to tune into what's happening for me physically, I'll notice my shoulders my elbow kind of up to my shoulder, tensing up a little bit, more intense on one side than the other. And if I try to sit with that feeling, it often intensifies. And I can feel my elbows sort of pulling into my obliques. You might have some of these patterns of your own that you notice or that you can tune into if you, if you try to notice. Um, Sometimes I think that I get these physical sensations because I let the transphobic doctor touch me, or maybe just because I'm lacking in some kind of key mineral or type of fat. Um, I stopped eating meat about a year ago, and I don't want to eat animals, but sometimes when I'm under a lot of stress and I feel that tense, jangly, tightened up feeling, um, it feels like I need to have some beef stew or some bone broth, like something warm and liquid made of sacrificial parts. Um, that's, sometimes these things that come up are sort of metaphors or strange images, but to sit with them and notice them and play with them, I think can be really helpful. The transphobic doctor said that my body was asymmetrical, and that's why I have trouble relaxing or breathing deeply or being still. She said that I have poor balance and a hyperactive mind. And maybe all of that is true, but she also couldn't stop calling me ma'am or young lady, even though my transition and the experiences of my being in this body were the subject of the treatment that she was offering. When I was writing this, even, I noticed my body becoming tense and constricted, but also soft in other ways. So I sort of slumped down until I'm a weird, kind of crunched up, protective shape. But then my body wakes back up again, and I could hear the dogs, and they got their bones. And my wife went out to take care of the chickens. Um, and I noticed that I've been able to at least condense the time it takes to respond when I'm triggered, when I'm distressed, when I'm overwhelmed. When you feel anxious, really try to notice what makes you settle. Look for a warm and gentle light, and that could be literally or metaphorically. Um, Transitioning for me has made it sometimes feel hard to talk. I don't think taking testosterone has changed my ability to explain things, but acknowledging that I wanted to or needed to transform myself made something go quiet in me, something that was hard to explain, which is scary. When you're a writer and a therapist, your job is to understand things and to talk about them. But what it comes down to is that I think the best way to get through a bad year and to come out the other side is to figure out how to exist in your body as much as possible, which means to eat food and drink water and lie on comfortable surfaces, to be touched in comforting ways, and to find ways to be safely still, and to experiment with new ways of being and feeling things. And as much as you can, to be generous and curious with yourself and with others. The best way to do that I've figured out as a person and as a therapist, is to seek out and create feelings of safety, even if those things are small or temporary. Again, not so that we can stay at home and feel balanced and centered and good about ourselves, but so that we can go out in the world, literally or metaphorically right now for a lot of us, and build the kind of world that we want to live in where everyone can be safe and everyone can be free. So I'm going to wrap this talk up with one more meditation exercise. And go back to my slides for a second. All right. So the last exercise is one that I've used a lot with therapy clients, and I want to encourage you again to just close your eyes and imagine or think about a place that you feel really safe and comfortable. This could be a place that you have spent time in the past. This could be a place in your home right now. This could be an imaginary environment. Um, the laws of physics and the space-time continuum don't apply right now. So you can just really imagine a space where you feel safe, whether that's a treehouse, an island, a bunker, a cloud, a spaceship, under your bed, in a nest, um, So just really take a moment and think about that. Close your eyes if you're capable. Um, Take some deep breaths, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, noticing what's going on in your body, noticing if anything in your body is tense or tight. And as you think about that safe place, notice how your body feels as you really imagine that safe place. Let yourself imagine looking around in that place or walking around. Uh, Notice, what's around you, what's above you and below you, any sounds in the environment. Think about anything that might be there to keep you safe or to keep you protected um, from from things on the outside. That might be a bubble. It might be a membrane. It might be a wall. It might be a lock. So imagine all the things around you that keep you safe, that make you comfortable, so that you are able to breathe, to stretch out, to settle in your body, and to rest. Just fill in as many details as you can of this safe place. Um, think about if there's anybody with you there in this imaginary safe place. There might be animals or plants. There might be other people. Um, Notice if there's any sounds outside of the safe place for you, the ocean, the wind, the birds, music, laughter. Just really let yourself sit there in that imaginary safe place. Notice how your body feels while you think about it, and breathe deeply and see if you can notice anything settling in your body. See if you can relax any tense or tight places in your body. And notice if any feelings come up right now while you're thinking about this. Any sadness, any relief, um, any impulses to, just notice all of that and breathe deeply. And look around your safe place one more time, your imaginary safe place. Um, and realize and remember that no matter what is going on externally, that you can create this inner safe space at least for a few moments, and that you deserve to feel safe. You deserve some feelings of peace. And when we can create those inner feelings of peace and safety, even for a few moments, that does settle something in us, and we're able to be more capable, be more calm, be more present, so that we can show up in the world and show up for others, and make the kind of world that we want to live in. So I thank you all for listening today. I hope some of these exercises have been helpful for you in thinking about stress, thinking about trauma, thinking about the conditions of the world that we're living under right now, so that we can go in peace and go in power, and build the community and the kind of world that we want to live in. And thank you, Brandon, for having me, and everyone, be well. Have a nice day. Bye.